Hello, kia ora, I'm Philip Duncan and thanks for joining us for our Wednesday weather update recorded on the 22nd of January. Well, we've got low pressure around the North Island. This is driving in a bit of a wet east to southeasterly flow for that northeastern corner, but generally speaking that low is falling apart, certainly not driving in the severe weather risks that it did yesterday for some areas. So the windy conditions have certainly eased over the top of the country after a windy past several days. Now that is easing, bit of a southerly flow coming through or a southeasterly, and for many areas in the north of the country that can be quite hot. At the other end of New Zealand we've got a nor'easter blowing through along the eastern side and perhaps a bit of a southwesterly for some of you over on the west coast. But this big storm in the Southern Ocean is going to drive in a nor'wester for some regions as it tracks along past us. 7-day rainfall ahead. Well, this is the departure from normal, so it shows you from a percentage point of view, compared to previous years over the last few decades, how much wetter or drier is it over the next week. And what you're seeing is much of New Zealand is leaning drier than average. The blue you see here, obviously from the rain event we're kind of getting at the moment, and there might be a little bit of wet weather again coming in this weekend for some of these northern areas. So you're seeing that blue shading. It's only at the pale blue area, so that means it's just 150% wetter than average. 800% is some of the darker blue areas. Not much of that on the map at the moment, maybe a couple of blips out at sea. But look, most of Australia, the Tasman and New Zealand is either average or drier than average on this map. So that means conditions are drier than usual at the moment in many parts of not just only New Zealand but Australia as well. You might not believe that though if you had some flooding yesterday at the top of the North Island. All right, let's have a look at Thursday's setup. So the storms in the Southern Ocean are still there. There's a number of them and they are not going anywhere anytime soon. So they are pretty much with us for the rest of our summer, I think we can safely say. The tropics, pretty quiet at the moment. There is more life up there next week. But for now, pretty quiet up in the tropical areas and very quiet around northern parts of Australia. So down around New Zealand, we do have a cold front. Talked about that nor'wester. Well, tomorrow that changes pretty quickly to a southerly in some areas or a sou'wester. And the top of New Zealand, that sort of windier sou'wester returns to Auckland and Coromandel because I'm sure you've missed the wind. You only had one day without it, so it's got to come back at some point. Over here on the other side of Australia, what was Tropical Cyclone Sean should be gone by tomorrow Thursday. Might still be around as a Category 1. It was still Category 2 as we recorded this, and it is offshore. So as we go into the weekend, here's what happens. A new low forms in the Tasman Sea, another storm down in the Southern Ocean, and around the New Zealand area we've got a weak area of high pressure to the north here. It's a little bit cut off, but that's high pressure just to the north, and that is stretching down across the country. Now there's a wee bit of instability around the South Island on Friday, so there could be a couple of afternoon showers, maybe an isolated heavy fall in there, but otherwise the winds are light and pretty dry around New Zealand. Now this weekend, when I did the last video a couple of days ago, we talked about this low merging with this Southern Ocean low. That is not looking so likely now. Now, what does that mean? It means probably less likely to see a burst of really windy and colder weather this weekend. So for some of you, that'll be very good news to hear. So we still are going to see rain coming in this weekend, but it's not quite as connected to that stormy system down to the south of us. So that means warm northerly winds coming through, north to northwesterlies. Saturday won't be cold, and we've got a little bit of wet weather in the northwestern corner of the South Island, maybe a couple of showers there around Bay of Plenty. Now on Sunday, that was when we kind of expected these two systems to merge, and they sort of do. This low in the Tasman is pretty much being absorbed into the much bigger storm south of the country, but it's not properly doing that, and so therefore we're not going to get a big surge of colder air. And in fact, even these southerlies coming in around Invercargill and other parts of Southland, if you track the origins of them, they're actually coming out of the central part of Australia. So it is not super cold, but the airflow south of New Zealand down here is. So it's kind of brushing that colder airflow, so temperatures definitely do drop on Sunday in some areas. The top of the country, no real temperature drop. You've still got northerly winds, northwesterly winds, and some patchy rain coming in from the north for the North Island and sort of hanging around the South Island. By Monday, the next high in the Tasman Sea is coming along like a bulldozer. It's pushing that wet weather away. But now that southerly, the cooler southerly comes into Wellington, Wairarapa, Hawke's Bay, Gisborne, and some other regions like Taranaki, Wanganui. Not quite so much in those other areas. It's more of a southern to eastern side of the North Island where that southerly flow comes in. And the coldest of the air is just off to the east of Dunedin. But look at these storms down here in the Southern Ocean. So our final map for Tuesday next week, 9:57. It may be lower than that. It might be closer to 9:50. Big storm south of New Zealand. That encourages windy westerlies over Tasmania and over the South Island. Northwards over the North Island, high pressure is still around. So we're the only forecaster in New Zealand that has been consistently talking about what is going on south of the country, dominating our weather this summer. The other guys, they're still talking about La Nina. I guess they're using their own supercomputer. There's no other reason to explain why they are obsessed with something that's not happening at the moment. I mean, sure, it might happen at some point. A broken clock is right twice a day. So if you keep saying it long enough, it might happen. But we are still focused on the Southern Ocean. So that is definitely dominating our weather as we go into the month of February. No major changes just yet. But like I said before about the tropics, there is a chance that we might be seeing the tropical area waking up a wee bit more as we go in towards February. So we are at the peak of the cyclone season in February and March. We do normally see the highest risk of tropical storms and lows during those 2 months. February is also usually New Zealand's hottest month of the year. So we'll be seeing what goes on. It's sort of getting to that interesting time of the year, February, March, especially in the South Pacific. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that as we go in towards next week. But that is all from me for today. I will see you again tomorrow, Thursday, with our next update.